and friends, welcome to Japanese Knitting Mini Lesson 3. My name is Athena and I am a knitter based in Vancouver, Canada, and I am a huge fan of Japanese knitting designs and patterns, and I have knitted numerous Japanese patterns. I am from China, but I have learned the Japanese language for a couple of years, so I'm able to use their patterns. But the big benefits of Japanese patterns is that they are heavily charted and they use a lot of schematics, so that even if you don't understand the language at all, you will still be able to use their patterns. And there are so many unique designs in the Japanese knitting world that I would like to promote among the English knitting world. In these Japanese knitting mini lessons, I am going to select one free Japanese pattern each time, and I will walk you through the details of this pattern so that you will learn how to read Japanese knitting patterns without even learn the language. These mini series can be watched alone, and you can pick the project that is of interest to you. But as the time goes by, I will also select more and more difficult projects to show you the different aspects of the Japanese knitting and show you the different techniques. These series can get a bit technical, so if you would like more relaxing content, I would recommend you check out my knitting podcast, also in this channel, where I talk more about some of the Japanese knitting projects that I have done, some Japanese knitting books I have collected, and I'll talk more about the knitting culture and the designers, so a little bit more fun stuff. But if you're ready for some more technical stuff, let's dive into today's lessons. Today I have selected this lacy summer top pattern, and the main goal for this class is to teach you how to read full garment schematics of Japanese patterns. So without further ado, let's dive into my computer screen and I'll walk you through this pattern. All the free patterns in this series are found in this Pieho Yarn website, which is a Japanese yarn brand, and they are giving out a lot of free patterns on their website. And today's pattern are from the summer spring sweater category, and if you click this link, you will find a list of free patterns for like spring summer tops, and today's pattern is found on this page as well, and this is the pattern that I'm going to walk you through today. You can use the link in the description below or click here to download the PDF of the pattern, which looks like this. But before we dive into the pattern, I want to point you to some Japanese knitting resources that I make available. The first one is this Japanese knitting bookmark, which shows you the conversion charts for Japanese knitting needle sizes to US needle sizes and to the metric. And this conversion charts for the Japanese and US or UK yarn weight or their gauge and the needle sizes that you use for each of these sizes. You can print this page and make a handy bookmark. And also I made this public Google Sheet to show you the different knitting symbols. These are some Japanese knitting symbols, and the Japanese for these stitches and the English abbreviations and explanations for these stitches. And then the instructional test. I have just updated this chart so that you can understand some of the basic Japanese characters that appears in the Japanese patterns. So let's look at this pattern. The Japanese patterns are all structured like this. There's some basic information about this project, and then some schematics of this project, and then some symbol chart to show you how to do some of the stitch patterns. First, this is about the yarn it uses. This character, if we look at the conversion chart, it means the yarn. The yarn it uses is this rough yarn, and you can do a quick search in Ravelry to find what yarn it is. And this is a sport weight yarn with a 40 gram each ball of 120 meters. And this is a cotton merino blend yarn. You probably cannot buy the yarn in the Western world, but you can easily find a yarn with similar components and similar weight. I think perhaps the Sandnes Garn Dual will be a good substitute of this yarn. And next, it's about the needle. And it is using the size 5 and size 6 needle. And if we look at the conversion chart, the 5 or 6 Japanese sizes converts to 3.6 or 3.9 millimeter needle. And we don't have the exact same size in the US, so we will use 3.5 millimeter needle and 4 millimeter needle instead. And then there's some basic measurements for the pattern. You don't have to understand all these details because all the measurements are also plotted in the schematics below. So basically it's saying the bust measurements is 89 centimeters. And there's an unfortunate side of the Japanese patterns is that they usually just offer one size, and to modify the size it will be up to the knitter. So I would still recommend some experienced knitter to knit Japanese pattern. So if you haven't knitted any sweater before, I would recommend you to follow English text pattern first to understand the construction of sweaters before jumping into the Japanese knitting patterns. And next, it's talking about the gauge of a 10 centimeter square. It is talking about the stitch patterns. These two characters, ami, means stitch patterns. So something something ami would mean some sort of stitch pattern. And if this, which means stocking stitch or stockinette stitch, miriyasu, ami, if this and that connects together, it means the stocking stitch pattern. And these two characters means some specified stitch pattern. And in this case, this lacy part will be this sort of stitch pattern. So in either stitch pattern, your gauge for a 10 centimeter square will be 22 stitches times 32 rows. And here is some basic instruction of this project. So all these information are actually shown in the schematics. So let's look at the schematics. These two characters means a panel of the garment, and usually the front panel and the back panel are different. That will look like this character plus these two characters means the front panel of a garment, and this character plus these two characters would mean the back of the panel. But for this project, the front panel and the back panel is exactly the same. So it's just showing you one schematics for these two panels, and it's telling you to do two pieces of this same panel. And starts from the bottom. You can see this arrow is showing you the knitting direction. So Japanese patterns, it's very common that you knit bottom up instead of top down. So you will cast on 98 stitches. These two characters means casting on. So you cast on 98 stitches and with the size 5 needle, and you do garter stitch, and you go on and you knit garter stitch for only 8 rows, and that converts to 2 centimeters. And it's also giving you the measurements for width. It will be 44.5 centimeters. In Japanese pattern, the C just means centimeters. And after the garter section, you will use the size 6 knitting needle to do the stocking stitch part. And for that, you will do 102 rows or 32 centimeters. And then you go to this part, you see there is a curve with increasing stitches. And you see these little numbers 1-1-1, 2-1-2. And these numbers are showing you how to increase. For here, you can see it gets wider, so it is increasing. But in some other Japanese patterns, if your curve is going on this direction, then these little numbers will mean the decreasing rate. So anyway, in Japanese, it uses these like X-Y-Z number codes to show you the increasing or decreasing rates. And these numbers are listed as row, stitches, and how many times you repeat. So for example, starting here, you will do every 1 row, you increase 1 stitch, and you do that 1 time. So that's just 1 row. And then you do every 2 rows, you increase 1 stitch, and you repeat that for 2 times. And then again, 1-1-1 means you increase 1 stitch every row, and you only do that 1 time. So together you did 1 plus 4 plus 1 is 6 rows, and it's showing you this 6 rows or 2 centimeters are the section where you increase so that you reach the armpit. And the increasing rate on the right hand side will be mirrored to the left hand side. So on the right, you increased towards the right by 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches, and on the left hand side, you are doing the same increasing rate, and you increased 4 stitches as well. So together, you increased 8 stitches, so that you bring your total stitch number from 98 to 106. And then from here on, you are going to keep knitting the stock stitch for 16 rows or 5 centimeters. And then you will do the stitch pattern, which will be the lacy pattern like here, with the size 5 knitting needle, and you will do that for 44 rows or 14 centimeters. And these little marks is showing you the neck hole. So these 52 stitches will be neck hole, and you will just rest these stitches on a waste yarn or an extra cord on your knitting needle. And then for the other 27 stitches, you should also rest them on a waste yarn. And let's look at this bit. This matome means the finishing off. So this is showing you how to finish off the details once you have finished the 2 garment panels. So after you have finished the 2 panels, first you will pick up some stitches around the neck, and these 2 characters means picking up. So it's telling you you will pick up 106 stitches, and that's including the 52 stitches on the front and back panel, as well as 2 extra stitches, 1 on each side. And this is marked as the star. On this side, it's telling you to do this, and this character means doing the Kitchener stitch. So you will do the Kitchener stitch to graft the front piece and the back piece together. After that, you can do the armhole. And for the armhole, it's telling you to pick up 84 stitches. Remember, these 2 characters means picking up. You pick up 84 stitches around the armhole, and you do 4 rows of garter stitch. It's also saying using the size 5 needle to do garter stitch on both the neck and the 2 sleeves. And you knit that for 2 centimeters or 8 rows along the sleeve. And for the neck, you will knit 4 rows of garter stitch. That's 1 centimeter in length. And after that, along the rib, you will do mattress stitch. These characters means the mattress stitch, so you just use mattress stitch to connect the front panel and the back panel together. And next, let's look at the symbol chart to look at the details of this front and back panel. So these 2 characters means the garment panels, and the symbol is showing you the blank square means a square with a vertical line. And just look at our symbol chart. The vertical line is a knit stitch, which is a common replacement. And the square with the horizontal line is a purl stitch. And on the first row, you are going to cast on 98 stitches. These are casting on stitches. So you are knitting in the flat, and all these symbol charts are showing you the results that's seen on the right side. So the first line, you do the cast on, and on the second line, you will work on the wrong side, which means you will also have to knit all these stitches so that on the right side, these will look like purl stitches. And then on the third row, you are going to knit on the right side, and on the fourth row, you are going to knit on the wrong side. And you just keep going for 8 rows to do 8 rows of garter stitches, and then you enter the stocking stitch section, which you will knit in the right side and purl in the wrong side to do the stocking stitch until you reach row 102. So as shown in the schematics, you do 102 rows of stocking stitch. Now we reach the section where we need to increase stitches. And if we go back to the schematics, it's saying 1 by 1 by 1 first. So the first row, you just increase 1 stitch by 1 time. And in this symbol chart, it didn't show you what kind of increasing stitch you need to do. And these kind of things are kind of implicit in Japanese patterns. So I'm just gonna spell out how to do the increase here. So normally you will knit the first stitch and then you will make 1 left on the right hand side, and then you just keep knitting until you reach there's only 1 stitch left, and at that point you make 1 right and then you knit the last stitches. So on the right hand side you have 1 stitch and then make 1 left, and on the right hand side you have 1 stitch left before you make 1 right. And then you increase in a 2 by 1 by 2 fashion. So every 2 rows you increase by 1 stitch. So this is the second row, this is the third row. So on the second row you don't do anything, and on the third row you increase 1 stitch here, make 1 left here, and make 1 right here. And on the fourth row you don't do anything, and on the sixth row you increase 1 stitch on each side. And on the sixth row you do this 1 by 1 by 1 increase, so you increase again. So you on the total you increased 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches within these 6 rows. And then you will just keep doing the stocking stitch for another 16 rows until you reach the stitch pattern, which is shown here. So it is a very long pattern and split it into 2 panels. And the first 1 to 53 stitches are listed here. And these 2 characters means the center. And on the left-hand side of the center line, the column 54 and column 106 are plotted here. And you can, like when you print this page, you can stick them together to see the full stitch pattern. And then you will keep doing the same thing on the first row, which will be a right side row, I believe. On the first row, you keep knitting, 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 knitting until you reach here. And this circle, let's look at our symbol chart, is a yarn over. And yarn over is like the basic stitch to make a lacy pattern. And then this will be a decreasing stitch. Let's see, the right covering left, and that will be the SSK. So you yarn over and you SSK and you knit another 2 stitches and you yarn over and you SSK and you keep going, and then you keep going, yarn over, SSK, knit 2 stitches, yarn over, SSK, and then you knit to the rest. And on the second row, which is a wrong side row, you will just do hole purling. And on the third row, which is a right side row, you keep going and do, this will be the knit together symbol, and yarn over, knit 2, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2. And you do that in a similar fashion and just keep going through this chart until you finish 44 rows of these stitch patterns. And it's showing you a shadowed region here. And this is just showing you the repeat for this pattern is 4 stitches by 4 rows. So every 4 stitches and 4 rows, you have 1 pattern repeat. But you have to be careful that you need to follow the pattern to have this like V-shaped silhouette of this lacy pattern. And there you have it. Okay, I hope this project has been of interest to you. I am running a Japanese Knitting KAL on the Instagram with the hashtag Japanese Knitting KAL. So if you knit this pattern or knit any other Japanese patterns that I have recommended or you have found by yourself, I would invite you to join this knit along by using the hashtag, and you can add me at @SD_Athena so that I can check out your Japanese knitting, and I would really love to see other knitters' interpretation on one of these Japanese knitting projects. If these mini lessons were helpful to you, please consider donate on my Ko-fi page, ko-fi.com/seedlingstitch, to support me so that I can bring more of these mini lessons and Japanese knitting goodies to you more regularly. Also, leave a comment in below and let me know what kind of projects or garments you would be interested in making, and I can try to find some of these Japanese designs from the database. And I am planning on a cable slipper kind of project for our next knitting classes so that I can teach you how to read the Japanese cable symbols. Let me know what you think about that. And until next time, happy knitting and have fun. Bye!